Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are the first group. We will present about historical research. And here is our group's member. The first is Alisha, Alma, Sifani, and then Alvilda Delsyia, and then the third is Nurul, Aflakha, and the last Lisa, Amelia. For the first is introduction. Port 1963. According to Port 1963, historical research has been defined as the systematic and objective location, evaluation, and synthesis of evidence in order to establish facts and draw conclusions about past events. In other words, historical studies are oriented to the past. Historical studies are oriented to the past rather than to the present, and thus use different data collection methods from those used in other qualitative approaches. Historical research is included in qualitative research because of its emphasis on interpretation and its use of the attempt to understand. And then there are several values of historical research by Hill and Herbert. The first is it enables solution to contemporary problems to be solved in the past. And then the second is it throws light on present and future trends. And then the third, it stresses the relative importance and the effects of the various interactions that are to be found within all cultures. And then the last is it allows for the evaluation of data in relation to selected hypotheses, theories, and generalizations that are presently held about the past. And then the point is the ability of history to employ the past to predict the future and to use the present to explain the past gives it a dual and unique quality, which makes it especially useful for all sorts of scholarly study and research. And the particular value of historical research in the field of education is unquestioned. Further, the historical study of an educational idea or institution can do much to help us understand how our present educational system has come about. And this kind of understanding can in turn help to establish a sound basis for further progress or change. Historical research in education can also show how and why education theories and practices developed. It enables educationalists to use former practices to evaluate newer emerging ones. Historical research in education may concern itself with an individual, a group, or a movement, an idea, or an institution. No one person can be subjected to historical investigation without some consideration of his or her contribution to the ideas, movements, or institution of a particular time or place. And then about choice of subject. Historical research may be constructed by a flexible sequence of stages, beginning with the selection and evaluation of a problem or area of study, then follows the definition of the problem in more precise terms, the selection of suitable sources of data, collection, classification, and processing of the data, and finally, the evaluation and synthesis of the data into a balanced and objective account of the subject under investigation. And then about selecting a topic. The choice of a problem can sometimes be daunting business for the potential researchers. And about identifying a topic, The first is where do the events take place. It about the geographical area involved can be increased or decreased. And then who are the people involved? More or fewer people can be included in the topic. And then when do the event occur? The time spent involved can be increased or decreased. And then the last, what kinds of human activity are involved? The human activity category can be broadened and narrowed. And then the hypothesis. The hypothesis gives direction and focus to data collection and analysis. It imposes a selection, a structure on what would otherwise be an overwhelming mass of information. As Borg 1963 observes, without a hypothesis, historical research often becomes little more than an aimless gathering of facts. Hill and Carbon 1967 have pointed out that the evaluation and formulation of a problem associated with historical research often involves the personality of the researcher to a greater extent than do other basic type of research. Okay, that's all of me. The next material will be delivered by Alvilda.
Okay, now I will explain about the steps. The first step is data collections. Comprehensive gathering of data is undertaken. Historical sorts of data are usually classified into two main categories. The first is primary source. The second is secondary source. Next slide. The primary source are first-hand information that includes first, remains or relics associated with persons, group, periods, or events. Second is fossils, skeletons, tools, weapons, utensils, clothing, furniture, pictures, painting, coins, and art objects are examples of remains that were not deliberately intended for use in transmitting information or to be used as the record. The next is oral or testimony or the report kept and written by actual participants in an event or actual witness of the same. The last is documents called as primary source are constitutions, characters, laws, official reports, tips, wills, license, newspaper, magazine, and etc. So the secondary source, these are the reports of people who relate the testimony of an actual witness of an event or actual participants in the same. For example, most of the history books and encyclopedia. The second step is criticism of data. The second step necessitates a comprehensive review of data material. Firstly, 1975 described the analytic process of document review as a two-pronged activity. The first is external criticism, the second is internal criticism. The first is external criticism, is the establishment of validity by determining the authenticity of the source. It is external criticism is covered basically with the authenticity and genuineness of the data. The next is it primarily deals with data relating to form and appearance rather than meaning of content, while internal criticism weighs the testimony of document in relation to truth. The last is see the nurse ascertained that all the documents were original. First-hand, oral, and written accounts were accepted as valid. So the next is internal criticism. The determination of reliability by correctly interpreting the contents of documents. There are the first is the use of original authentic source, awareness of one's bias, The subtension of the document is questioned by another collaborating source are a few of the safeguards used to ensure that interpretations are correct. Next is to ensure reliability. The nurse examined each document to make sure that the meaning of facts and statements were clearly understood. The next is after authenticity of a historical document or relic has been established. The next question is to establish the validity of its contents or to determine the accuracy and value of the statement made. The next is in performing internal criticism, historians must make several determinations which require historical knowledge beyond perusal of the material in question. The last is evidence bearing on the accuracy of historical data may include one of the following. The first is comparison with other people's accounts of the same event to determine degree of agreement. Second is knowledge of time at which the document was produced. The third is knowledge of the points of view or bias of the written and oral document. And the last is knowledge of the degree of competence of the writer to record event authoritatively and accurately. So the last explanation will be delivered by our sister Alisha Alma.
Okay, the next material is about writing the research report. Once the data have been gathered and subjected to external criticism for authenticity and to internal criticism for accuracy, the researcher is next confronted with the task of piecing together an account of the events embraced by the research problem. This stage is known as the process of synthesis. It's probably the most difficult phase in the project and calls for considerable imagination and resourcefulness. The resulting pattern is then applied to the testing of the hypothesis. Past 1970 has listed the kinds of problems occurring in the various types of historical research projects submitted by students. These include: first, the selection of a topic for which historical sources are slight, inaccessible, or non-existent. Second is over-reliance on secondary sources. The third is failure to subject the historical sources to internal or external validity or criticism checks. Fourth is lack of reflexivity and the researcher's selectivity and bias in his sources. Fifth is importing concepts from other disciplines. Number six is making illegitimate inferences of causality and more causality. Seven is generalizing beyond acceptable limits of the data. And the last is listing facts without appropriate dramatization. Next slide, please. Mauli 1978 itemizes five basic criteria for evaluating historical research. Number one is problem. Has the problem been clearly defined? It is difficult enough to conduct historical research adequately without adding to the confusion by starting out with a nebulous problem. Second is data. Are data of a primary nature available in sufficient completeness to provide a solution, or has there been an over-dependence on secondary or unverifiable sources? Number three is analysis. Has the dependability of the data been adequately established? Has the relevance of the data been adequately explored? And number four is interpretation. Does the author display adequate mastery of his data and insight into the relative significance? Does he display adequate historical perspective? Does he maintain his objectivity, or
personal bias to distort the evidence? Are his hypotheses plausible? Have they been adequately tested? And does he see the relationship between his data and other historical facts? The last is writing attract as well as inform. Does the report make a contribution on the basis of newly discovered data or new interpretation, or is it simply uninspired hackwork? Does it reflect scholarliness? Next is about the use of quantitative methods. Uh, by far, the greater part of research in historical studies is qualitative in nature. This is so because the proper subject matter of historical research consists to a great extent of verbal and other symbolic material emanating from a society's or a culture's past. In the comparatively recent past, however, attempts have been made to apply the quantitative methods of the scientists to the solution of historical problems. Travers 1969. Of this method, the one having greatest relevance to historical research is that of content analysis, the basic goal of which is to take a verbal, non-quantitative document and transform it into quantitative data. By late 1978, content analysis itself has been defined as a multi-purpose research method developed specifically for investigating a broad spectrum of problems in which the content of communication serves as a basis of inference from word counts. Travers 1969 to categorization. Next slide. The purpose of content analysis have been identified by Holstein 1968. Number one is to describe trends in communication content. Number two is to relate known characteristics of sources to messages they produce. Number three is to audit communication content against standards. Number four is to analyze the techniques of persuasion. Number five is to analyze style. Number six is to relate known attributes of the audience to messages produced for them. And the last is to describe patterns of communication. The next slide will be delivered by Amel.
Okay, the next slide is third step, presentation of faith. After evaluating the authenticity and acquire of historical data, the research must bring the material together to analyze it and to test the research hypothesis. Life history. The life history, according to Plummer 1983, is frequently a full-length book about one person's life in his or her own words. Often, Plummer observed it is gathered over a number of years. The research providing gentle guidance to the subject, encouraging him or her either to write down episodes of life or to tape record them. And often as not, this material will be backed up with intensive observation of the subject life, with interview of the subject friend and acquaintance, and with close scrutiny or relevant document such as letter, diaries, and photograph. Essentially, the life history is interactive and cooperative technique direct involving the research Plummer 1983. Okay, the next. The next is preparation. This involves the research, but in selecting an appropriate problem and devising relevant research technique. The earlier stage of this project also provides opportunity for discussing with the research subject the precise nature of the life history study, the logistic of interview, situation, and mode of data recording. Data collection, as the occasion demands, they may range from relatively structured interview that serve as general guide from the outset of the study to informal, unstructured interview remains of non-direct counseling approach as spoke by Carl Roger 1935 and his followers. In the case of the later Plummer 1983, draw attention to the importance of the empathy and non-possessive form on the part of the interview research. And data storage. Typically, lab is history generate enormous amount of data. Identing research must make early decision about the use of tape recording, the how, what, and when of their transcription and editing, and the development of coding and filling device if they are to avoid being totally spammed by the material trade. Okay, the next. The last part is data analysis. From draw attention to a frequent criticism of life history research, namely that it is case or typical rather than representative. To avoid this charge, he used attending research to work out and imply the state of the life history relationship to a wider population, by way of placing the subject on a continuum of representativeness and non-representativeness. And the last is data presentation. Data presentation first have a clear view of who are writing for and what you wish to accomplish by writing the account. Are you aiming to produce a case history of a case study? Case history tell a good story for its own sake. And the second, having established the purpose of the life history, decide how far you should intro upon your asylum. And the third is preparing pulp editing involves getting your subject, onward, and structure for your own. Okay. Before I end this presentation, you can comment. Maybe you have question on YouTube.
Okay, guys, that's all of our presentation. If you have any question, you can write down in the comment below. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Salam.